Quick announcement before the video starts. In some parts of the Mansell and Smith family line and the Presley family line, you'll hear my voice reading certain parts. My apologies for the monotone voice, but this is my first time doing a YouTube recording like this. Welcome to All Things Elvis and Entertainment. In today's video, we're diving into a fascinating piece of history, the roots behind the king. We'll be taking a closer look at the lives of Gladys and Vernon Presley, the parents of Elvis Presley, and exploring how they shaped the man who would change music forever. Let's get into it. Introduction. No detailed, accurate account of Elvis's maternal ancestors has been published, though this branch running through the War of Independence, the Indian Wars, the Civil War, and the settling of the Southwest may be the most compelling. Biographers have focused on the paternal line, but in the harsh pioneer Southwest, it was the mother who bore the burden of the next generation's survival. As Steinbeck wrote in The Grapes of Wrath, the pioneer mother was the person of the greatest power. Tracing Elvis's maternal line means uncovering the blood and circumstance that forged Gladys and Elvis. Part 1, Family History, the Mansell and Smith families.
Mourning Dove White and William Mansell, the first generation. Elvis's great-great-great-grandmother, Mourning Dove White, 1800–1835, buried in Hamilton, Alabama. She married William A. Mansell, a settler in western Tennessee, in 1818. William's father, Richard Mansell, had been a soldier in the Revolutionary War. Mansell is a French name. Its literal translation is the man from Le Mans. The Mansells migrated from Norman, France to Scotland, and then later to Ireland. In the 18th century, the family came to the American colonies. The appellation White in Mourning Dove's name refers to her status as a friendly Indian. Early American settlers called peaceable Indians white, while red was the designation for warring Indians of those who sided with the British in the Revolutionary War. It was common for male settlers in the West to marry white Indians, as there was a scarcity of females on the American frontier. Her marriage to William Mansell brought her security ahead of the Cherokee removals, while she brought expertise in the land. Mansell staked a claim near Pikeville around 1820 and built a substantial farmhouse, now a ruin. The couple had 3 children: John Bailey Mansell, born 1828, Mourning Dizaney Mansell, born 1832, and James J. Mansell, born 1835, the year Mourning Dove died. William raised them alone. Mourning Dizaney Mansell and the Palmer family. Mourning Dizaney married Dr. Russell Palmer, a prominent physician 14 years her senior. They raised 12 children. Of the boys, 3 of them, George, Lafayette, and Grant, became farmers. 1 became a minister and 1 a merchant. And of the 2 that became doctors, Dr. Benjamin Palmer had a town named after him, and Dr. Alexander Sherman Palmer, a surgeon who practiced in Hamilton, had a distinguished enough career to merit over a page in William S. Biddle's notable Men of Alabama, 1893. Mourning Dizaney became a stern matriarch and was buried in the Palmer family cemetery, her grave marked with stones in Cherokee tradition. John Mansell, the Wild One. John Mansell, half Scots-Irish, half Indian, seems to have grown up wholly wild Injun, although by the time he was 22, he had married Elizabeth Betsy Gilmore, and they would have some 9 or 10 children together. There is much evidence that at some point, John added Betsy's sister Rebecca and her children, or rather their children, to his menage. By 1880, John Mansell had abandoned the Mansell farm, through inattention to some country matters and too much attention to others he had sold, or had taken away, or had slipped away from him the farm. And his sons, fed up, had years before struck out over the red clay cliffs into northeast Mississippi to seek their fortunes in that new country and homestead near the town of Saltillo, formerly in Itawamba County, but by 1880 part of Lee County, whose county seat Tupelo would be the birthplace of Elvis. So what did the amorous John Mansell do? Why, he takes Betsy and some of their younger children, and he takes his other wife, Rebecca, and their children, and he dumps them all on his son, White Mansell, there near Saltillo to make out as best they can. And then he promptly runs off with young Mandy Bennett to Oxford, Mississippi, where he will be born again as Colonel Lee Mansell. White Mansell and Martha Tackett moving to Mississippi. White Mansell, John's 3rd son, became head of the family after his father's desertion. Around 18, he married 16-year-old Martha Sue Tackett in 1870. Martha's mother, Nancy J. Burdine Tackett, was reportedly Jewish. Her family claims from Elvis's third cousin Oscar Tackett. A census shows White's crowded household near Saltillo. 12 people, including his children Melissa, Ida, Jeru, and Lucy, later known as Doll. Elvis's maternal grandmother, Octavia Luvenia Doll Mansell, Elvis's maternal grandmother. White's third daughter, Octavia Luvenia, was slender and tubercular, and her father's favorite. Nicknamed Doll, she hadn't married by 26. Despite poor health, she bore 9 children, 8 of whom survived, remarkable for the era. After her first birth, she rarely left her bed until her death at 59. Bob Smith, who'd loved her since childhood, never let her tuberculosis keep them apart.
Ann Mansell and Obie Smith. Obie Smith married Ann Mansell on December 13, 1874, when she was 20, he said, and he was 37. In 12 years, Obie and Ann produced 7 children. This seems to be about all Obie ever did produce. Obie was never able to give his family a house of their own. They always boarded with others. 6 years after their marriage, they and their children were still boarding at Thomas Winter's house in Saltillo. After some 20 years of boarding, Ann Smith had enough. Taking her younger children, Robert, Hal, Belle, John, and Tabby, with her, the older boys, Jim and Will, could look after themselves. She left Obie starboarder and went 20 miles south to a farm in Fawn Grove near the little town of Richmond in Lee County.
Robert Lee Smith and Doll Mansell, marriage and legacy. Bob Smith was a nice young man. Actually, he was a little younger than Doll, which only proved that, in her determination to be babied, age meant nothing. He was strikingly handsome, with his Indian blood coming plainly in his noble brow, his good bone structure, his straight, even features, his dark, deep-set eyes, and his hair black as water shining in moonlight. He was a hard worker, but not a skilled one, except in the one thing that he had a most definite talent for, and that was not farming. By spring 1903, 27-year-old Doll, long weary of adult life, married her first cousin Robert Lee Bob Smith, whom she'd known since childhood. They wed on September 20, 1903. In the end, Elvis's ancestry blended Scots-Irish and French-Norman roots, Cherokee heritage, and a thread of Jewish lineage, all shaped by a Southern, working-class Pentecostal upbringing.
Part 1. Historical and cultural background.
The land, Lee County and Pontotoc County. Known to many as the county where Elvis Presley grew up and made his first music, Lee County in northeastern Mississippi has a long history of events central to the story of the state. In one legend explaining the story of the Chickasaw, members of the tribe wandered from far in the west and chose to settle in old fields west of what became Tupelo. The area became a main location for the Chickasaw, and the crucial 1736 Battle of Acquia took place there. The county seat in Tupelo, while other communities include Plantsville, Saltillo, Shannon, Baldwin, and Verona. Lee County is sandy roads and deep green woods, with an old abandoned shack on a hill. Trees and hills keep the view close. Pontotoc County, where the Smiths moved to be near White Mansell, is flat and open with fields and orchards under summer sun. Blooming althea, crepe myrtle, and honeysuckle color the season, and dusk fades to rose and lavender as the trees go dark. Moonshining, the law of independence. Moonshine was illegal in Mississippi even before Prohibition, but locals followed their own code. Quality varied, bad batches tasted like kerosene, good ones like bourbon. Bob Smith made peach brandy and corn liquor, distilling 40 gallons at a time, running it through a copper coil until clear. Still stayed hidden in the hills near swampland, and a raid tip meant running fast. Unlike bootlegging kingpins, Bob made only modest income from it, just enough to help feed his family. When the mob tried moving in during Prohibition, local Scots-Irish moonshiners ran them off. For Bob, it was survival, not a lifestyle. Poverty, sharecropping, and the Depression. Sharecropping meant constant moving for the Smiths, chasing better land and always hoping for stability. Landowners would load up the family and relocate them. They cycled through nearby towns like Parkertown, Eggville, and Nettleton. Bob took any work he could: sharecropping, moonshining, ditch digging, cutting railroad ties. The Depression made things harder. After the 1932 bank failures, the county neared famine, and families even rationed matches. Despite his effort, a large family and a bedridden wife stretched Bob's income thin. with what little he had going toward Doll's needs. Hot-blooded and warm-hearted, violence and tenderness in the southern hills. The Scots-Irish Hill communities had a volatile streak. Justice of the peace Henry Jackson Lentz recorded earlier generations' feuds and violence in plain detail. Yet these same people loved deeply, fierce and affectionate at once. Neighbors called the Smiths poor but kind and gentle. When Bob Smith died, the community turned out as custom required. Southern families showed physical affection openly, and for the Smiths, family was everything bound by shared meals, work, and close quarters. Losing Bob was a profound loss. The Church of God, music, spirit, and community. Their hymns carried the soul of the blues, syncopated, raw, though more restrained than black gospel. Tempo shifted freely, and a soprano might break into flourishes that sounded improvised but were deeply practiced. This was Gladys's music, and later Elvis's. Church of God services back then were animated, with preachers pacing, shedding jackets, and pointing fingers, gestures Elvis later echoed on stage. The church also offered potlucks and treats, rare comforts for struggling families. Long before the stage, there was the pulpit. Long before the audience, there was the congregation that taught him how to move a room.
Part 2, Family History.
Bob and Doll Smith's children. After marrying, Doll and Bob moved in with his mother. Granny Ann Smith and children soon followed. Effie came first but died at 14 months. Then came Lillian in 1906, Laval in 1908, Retha in 1910, and Gladys Love Smith on April 25, 1912, Elvis's mother. 4 daughters in a row was hard on a farming family, since girls couldn't handle field work as easily as boys. Doll's first son, Travis, arrived in 1915, then Tracy in 1917, who lost his hearing to whooping cough but became a skilled acrobat. Kletz came in 1919 and John in 1922, 9 children total, 8 surviving. As the oldest, Lillian ran the household while Bob struggled to provide. The Smith family's journey farm to farm. The family relocated every couple of years, cycling through farms owned by various local families. One fire even destroyed their home. Farming never came easily to Bob, who filled in with hired labor and occasional moonshining. Around 1930, Bob secured a bank loan for a house and 30 acres on Burke's farm, the best home they'd ever had. Not long after, he fell fatally ill with pneumonia and died within a day, buried in an unmarked grave at Spring Hill Cemetery, the churchyard he'd cared for. Doll Smith ruling through weakness. Between illness and temperament, Doll had essentially stopped functioning as a traditional mother, yet she dominated the household from her bed, sending daughters into town for combs, lavender water, and medicine. Despite fragile health, she bore 9 children over 2 decades, her last at 46. Bob's devotion seemed to be what kept her going when he died suddenly. The family was so unprepared, a neighbor had to supply a burial shroud. Gladys Smith, childhood and character. Gladys was very highly strung, very nervous, very scary. She was frightened by all kinds of things, by thunderstorms and wind. She was always hearing noises outside at night and imagining there was someone in the bushes. A legacy from her moonshining daddy? But she was stubborn, too. You couldn't make her do anything she didn't want to. Headstrong, you could say she was. From her earliest years, there was a deep gap between Gladys' private fears and her public face. And so it would be throughout her life until the last 3 years when the gap would close and there was nothing but fear. Like all the other children from the area, Gladys went to school only 4 months out of the year in the winter. For the rest of the year, she was needed in the fields. Hewing cotton, chopping cotton, picking cotton, pulling corn. Gladys was not good with books, as they say. And though she took them home at night to do her homework, she rarely looked at them. They didn't interest her. Nevertheless, Gladys loved school because of the chance it gave her to be with other boys and girls. And especially she loved the one sport that girls were allowed to play, basketball. In this she triumphed. She may have had less materially than any of her classmates, but none of them could match her in her physical skills, in dribbling and passing and faking. So formidable a forward was she on her team that there was only one person adroit enough to guard her, and that was no less personage than the basketball coach herself, Miss Mary Harville. Gladys Smith, romance, loss, and independence. As her sisters married off, Gladys dated 2 first Pitt Harris, then Rex Stamford, who wanted to marry her, though she ended things herself. She also briefly ran off with a farmhand, returning home within 2 days upon learning he was already married. Without a mother to guide her, she learned early to rely on herself. Bob's death scattered the family. Doll moved in with Laval, Travis found work. Others went to relatives. Grief sent Gladys back into childhood listlessness. Only church could reliably draw her out. Gladys Smith, church work, and the road to Tupelo. The family's church, Church of God and Prophecy, in Union Grove, became Gladys's refuge, offering comfort, fellowship, and food to a family long viewed with pity. At church gatherings, she learned many farm girls her age now worked in Tupelo's mills instead of the fields. In December 1932, she joined them, taking a job as a sewing machine operator at the Tupelo Garment Center. A family friend later said few girls in Lee County had faced harder circumstances, and her survival spoke to remarkable resilience.
Conclusion. Gladys had been a girl who wilted at storms and grief alike, who slipped back into childhood listlessness when the world grew too hard to face standing up. But there was no farm left to retreat to now, no father's devotion to lean on, no matter capable of steering her. There was only the bus at dawn, the hum of sewing machines, and $2 a day. It wasn't much, it wasn't the life anyone would have chosen for her, but it was hers, earned and not given, and for the first time, Gladys Smith was not waiting on someone else to hold the family together. She was doing it herself. Section 1, Mansell and Palmer Line, Cherokee Revolutionary War Ancestors. Name, Mourning Dove White Mansell, born 1800, passed 1835, spouse William A. Mansell Sr., relation to Elvis, maternal great-great-great-grandmother. Info, she passed at the age of 35. It is presumed it had to do with giving birth to James J. Mansell.
Name, William A. Mansell Sr., born 1795 in South Carolina. Passed March 24, 1842 in Hamilton, Marion County, Alabama. Place of burial, Old Mansell Cemetery in Marion County, Alabama. Parents, Richard Rice Mansell and Elizabeth Betsy Gilmore Mansell. Spouse, Elendar Edgar. Children, Benjamin H. Mansell, Mourning Dezini Mansell Palmer, John Bailey Mansell, James Jordan Mansell. Military, fought under General Andrew Jackson in the Indian Wars, participated in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, Alabama, 1814, and later campaigns in Florida. Relation to Elvis, great-great-great-grandfather maternal line. Info, William Mansell is one of the most pivotal figures in this entire family history. A frontier settler and veteran of Andrew Jackson's Indian Wars campaigns, he married a Cherokee woman named Mourning Dove White, bringing Native American heritage into the Mansell bloodline. Name, Mourning Dezini Mansell Palmer. Born January 5, 1832, in Hamilton, Marion County, Alabama. Passed January 21, 1908, in Hamilton, Marion County, Alabama. Place of burial, Palmer Cemetery in Weston, Marion County, Alabama. Parents, William A. Mansell and Mourning Dove White Mansell. Spouse, Russell Porter Palmer. Siblings, John Bailey Mansell, James Jordan Mansell. Half-siblings, Benjamin H. Mansell, John Elbert Jordan Sr., Andrew Jackson Jordan. Children, Joseph Washington Palmer, Dr. Benjamin Franklin Palmer, Hezekiah White Palmer, William Russell Palmer, George Flowers Palmer, Lafayette Thomas Palmer, Dr. John Howard Palmer, Zachariah Gaines Palmer, Elizabeth Desinia Palmer Cooper, Reverend Eston Augustus Palmer, Dr. Alexander Sherman Palmer, General Grant Palmer. Info. Her older brother John would someday become the great-great-grandfather of Elvis Presley. Name, Russell Porter Palmer. Born September 5, 1818 in Greene County, Georgia. Passed July 27, 1908 in Marion County, Alabama. Place of burial, Palmer Cemetery in Weston, Marion County, Alabama. Parents, Benjamin Hezekiah Palmer and Elizabeth Roberts Palmer. Spouse, Mourning Dezini Mansell Palmer. Siblings, William Willis Palmer, Elijah Benjamin Palmer, John L. Palmer, Daniel Madison Palmer, Nancy Palmer. Camp, Levi Palmore, Palmer, Ann Palmer Miller, Augustus Henry, Gus Palmer, David Samuel Palmer, Joseph McKissick Palmer, Benjamin Franklin Palmer. Children, Joseph Washington Palmer, Dr. Benjamin Franklin Palmer, Hezekiah White Palmer, William Russell Palmer, George Flowers Palmer, Lafayette Thomas Palmer, Dr. John Howard Palmer, Zachariah Gaines Palmer, Elizabeth Desinia Palmer Cooper, Reverend Eston Augustus Palmer, Dr. Alexander Sherman Palmer, General Grant Palmer. Name John Bailey Mansell. Born 1828 in Hamilton, Marion County, Alabama. Passed June 4, 1895 in Russellville, Franklin County, Alabama. Place of burial, Old Covered Wagon Cemetery in Lafayette Springs, Lafayette County, Mississippi. Parents, William A. Mansell and Mourning Dove, White Mansell. Spouse, Elizabeth Betsy Gilmore Mansell. Siblings, Mourning Dezini, Mansell Palmer James Jordan Mansell. Half-siblings, Benjamin H. Mansell, John Albert Jordan Sr., Andrew Jackson Jordan. Children, W. M. Mansell, Albert White, Abel Mansell. Name Elizabeth Betsy Gilmore Mansell. Born 1832 in Marion County, Alabama. Passed 1885 in Mississippi. Place of burial, Old Covered Wagon Cemetery in Lafayette Springs, Lafayette County, Mississippi. Spouse, John Bailey Mansell. Children, W. M. Mansell, Albert White, Abel Mansell, Anna Elizabeth Lizzie Mansell Sullivan. Info. It has been said that John kept 2 households in Marion County, Alabama, one with his wife Elizabeth and another with her sister Rebecca Gilmore. Name Rebecca Gilmore Mansell. Born 1802. Past unknown. Place of burial, Old Covered Wagon in Lafayette Springs, Lafayette County, Mississippi. Parents, Andy Gilmore and Lida Gilmore. Spouse, John Bailey Mansell. Sister of Elizabeth Betsy Gilmore Mansell.
Section 2, Tackett and Mansell Line.
Name Martha Sue Tackett Mansell. Born March 17, 1851 in Saltillo, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed April 27, 1896 in Prentiss County, Mississippi. Parents, Abner Hampton Tackett and Celia Ann Butler Tackett. Spouse, Albert White, Abel Mansell. Siblings, Eleanor Caroline Tackett. Whitlock, PVT Lancaster John Lance Tackett. Abner Weisel Tackett. Samuel Elbert James Tackett. Senior, Sidney Smith Tackett Sr., Jerome Land Tackett. Children, Addison Smith Mansell, Octavia Luvinia, Doll Mansell, Jeru Mansell, James Hugh Mansell, Ada J. Mansell, Sim Eckford Mansell, Elmer Lynn Mansell, Jahue Hugh, John Mansell. Info. Her husband Albert White Mansell was Elvis Presley's great-grandfather, making Martha Tackett Elvis's great-grandmother. Name, Abner Hampton Tackett. Born February 6, 1803 in Knox County, Kentucky. Passed June 20, 1889 in Fayette County, Alabama. Place of burial, Bethlehem Cemetery in Mountain Star, Franklin County, Alabama. Parents, Lancaster Tackett and Ellender Burgess Hampton Tackett. Spouse Celia Ann Butler Tackett. Siblings John Tackett, Nathan Van Buren Tackett, Louis B. Tackett, Martha Jane Tackett Pennington. Children, Eleanor Caroline Tackett, Whitlock, PVT Lancaster. John Lance Tackett, Abner Wills Tackett, Samuel Elbert James Tackett Sr., Martha Sue Tackett Mansell, Sidney Smith Tackett Sr., Jerome Land Tackett. Name, Nancy J. Burdine Tackett. Born December 25, 1821 in Pickens, South Carolina. Passed October 8, 1859. Daughter of Abraham Burdine and Jenny Burdine. Sister of James Burdine, Sarah Burdine, Mason Burdine, Mary Burdine, Tally Davis Burdine, and Elizabeth Burdine.
Section 3, Smith Family Line.
Name, Octavia Lavinia Doll Mansell Smith. Born May 1876 in Saltillo, Mississippi. Passed 1935 in Richmond, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial, Mount Pleasant Methodist Church Cemetery in Tremont, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Parents Albert White, Abel Mansell, and Martha Sue Tackett Mansell. Spouse Robert Lee, Bob Smith. Siblings Addison Smith Mansell, Jeru Mansell, James Hugh Mansell, Ada J. Mansell, Sim Eckford Mansell, Elmer Lynn Mansell, James Hugh, John Mansell. Children Effie Smith, Lillian Smith, Man Fortenberry, Lavelle Linney Smith, John Lee William Smith, Retha Smith, Lloyd Riley, Gladys Love Smith, Travis James Woodrow, Wilson Smith, Tracy D. Smith, Cletz Lee, Smith Presley. Name, Anna Elizabeth Lizzie Sullivan, Mansell. Born October 25, 1854 in Hamilton, Marion County, Alabama. Passed October 29, 1935 in Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial, Bethlehem Cemetery in Saltillo, Lee County, Mississippi. Parents, William Mansell, Lorraine Cinderella Cobb Mansell. Spouse mileage Obadiah Obi Smith. Siblings: James Henry Mansell, Izariah Mansell, Talitha Mansell, Josiah Thompson Mansell, John Cobb Mansell Sr., Samuel Lewis Mansell Sr., William Duncan Mansell, George Washington Mansell Sr. Children: William Thomas, W.T. Smith, Robert Lee Bob Smith, Howard Halley Jefferson, Hal Smith, Ina Bell Smith, Boswell, John Henry Smith, Tabitha Tabby Smith. Relation to Elvis: great-grandmother of Elvis Presley. Name: mileage Obadiah Smith. Born February 1837 in Edgefield County, South Carolina. Passed May 2, 1909, in Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Unity Baptist Church Cemetery in Saltillo, Lee County, Mississippi. Spouse: Anne Lillian Annie Mansell Smith. Children: William Thomas W.T. Smith, Robert Lee, Bob Smith, Howard Halley Jefferson, Hal Smith, Ina Bell Smith Boswell, John Henry Smith, Tabitha Tabby Smith. Name: Robert Lee Bob Smith. Born March 24, 1879, in Lee County, Mississippi. Passed October 1931 in Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Mount Pleasant Methodist Church, Cemetery in Tremont, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Parents: mileage Obadiah Obi Smith and Anne Lillian Annie Mansell Smith. Spouse: Octavia Luvenia Dahl Mansell Smith. Siblings: William Thomas W.T. Smith, Howard Halley Jefferson, Hal Smith, Ina Bell Smith, Boswell, John Henry Smith, Tabitha Tabby Smith. Children: Effie Smith, Lillian Smith, Man Fortenberry, Lavelle Linney Smith, Retha Smith, Lloyd Riley, Gladys Love Smith, Travis James Woodrow Wilson Smith, Tracy D. Smith, Cletz Lee Smith Presley, Johnny Lee William Smith. Relation to Elvis: maternal great-grandfather of Elvis Presley.
Section 4. Children of Doll and Bob Smith.
Name: Effie Smith. Born July 21, 1904, in Mooreville, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed September 17, 1905, in Mooreville, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Andrews Chapel Cemetery in Mooreville, Lee County, Mississippi. Info: Effie was born 10 months after Bob and Doll's marriage and passed a year and 2 months later. Name: Lillian Smith Man Fortenberry. Born January 2, 1906, in Richmond, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed March 16, 1990, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. First spouse: Charlie Jaffe. Charlie Mann, married 1929. Second spouse: James Thomas Fortenberry, married 1950. Children: Lola Virginia Mann, Bickerstaff, Garland Mann, Robert Melvin, Mann, Billy Lee, Mann, Bobby, Jane Mann, Ayers, Wren, James, Edward Fortenberry. Name: Lavelle Linney Smith. Born February 14, 1908, in Tupelo, Mississippi. Passed April 9, 1979, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Spouse: William Ed Smith. Children: Lee Edward Smith Sr., Annie Laverne Smith Pate, Robert Melton Smith, Carol Jr. Smith, Tony Eugene Jean Smith. Name: Retha Smith Lloyd Riley. Born 1909 in Pontotoc County, Mississippi. Passed 1947 in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: cremated. First spouse: Purvey Lee T.C. Lloyd, married 1927. Second spouse: Walton Green Riley, married 1931. Children: Robert Harold Lloyd. Name: Gladys Love Smith. Born April 25, 1912, in Tupelo, Mississippi. Passed August 14, 1958, in Methodist Hospital, Memphis, Tennessee. Place of original burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Burial now: Graceland Mansion Estates in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Spouse: Vernon Elvis Presley. Children: Jesse Garin Presley, Elvis Aaron Presley. Name: Travis James Woodrow Wilson Smith. Born October 3, 1914, in Pontotoc County, Mississippi. Passed August 17, 1973, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Spouse: Lorraine Frances Ivy Smith. Children: Bobby James Smith. Name: Tracy D. Smith. Born February 19, 1917, in Lee County, Mississippi. Passed June 28, 1966, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial, Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Name, Cletsley Smith Presley. Born September 14, 1919, in Lee County, Mississippi. Passed December 9, 1994, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial, Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee. Spouse, Vesterly Presley. Children, Patsy Presley Gamble. Name, John Lee William Smith. Born April 19, 1922, in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed July 20, 1968, in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial, Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Spouse, Lily Mae Hurt Smith.
Other Smith family members.
Name, Tony Eugene Gene Smith, Jr., born on November 28, 1934, in Tupelo, Mississippi. Passed March 2, 1999, in southern Mississippi. Parents, William Ed Smith, Lavelle Linney Smith. Spouse, Lyra Louise Meem Fondren Smith. Siblings, Lee Edward Smith, Sr., Annie Laverne Smith, Pate, Robert Melton Smith, Carol Jr. Smith. Info, first cousin of Elvis Presley, grew up alongside Elvis in Tupelo and was part of the early Elvis entourage from the beginning of Elvis's career. Name, Carol Jr. Smith. Born August 2, 1932, in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed February 4, 1961, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial, Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Parents, William Ed Smith and Lavelle Linney Smith. Spouse, Lottie Irene Dixon. Siblings, Lee Edward Smith Sr., Annie Laverne Smith Pate, Robert Melton Smith, Tony Eugene Gene Smith Sr. Relation to Elvis. First cousin on his mother's side and an early member of the original Inner Circle. Info, former gatekeeper at Graceland. Name, Billy Smith. Born April 6, 1943, in Tupelo, Mississippi. Parents, Travis James Woodrow Wilson Smith and Lorraine Frances Ivy Smith. Spouse, Joe Smith. Children, Danny Smith and Joey Smith. Relation to Elvis, Elvis's first cousin.
Introduction. Before Elvis Presley, there was the Presley family, a lineage stretching back to a Scots blacksmith who settled in North Carolina in the 1740s and winding forward through generations marked by restlessness, hardship, and colorful contradiction. Chief among these ancestors was Vernon Presley Jr., a man notorious for simultaneous marriages and wartime desertion whose unsettled nature seemed to ripple through the family for decades afterward. That legacy surfaced again in Jesse D. J.D. Presley, Elvis's grandfather, who grew up in open rivalry with his brother Noah, one destined to become East Tupelo's respected mayor, the other cast by his own choosing as the family's troublemaker. J.D.'s marriage to Minnie Mae Hood and the household they built together would go on to shape his son Vernon in ways both direct and unspoken, setting the stage for the family history that eventually led to Elvis.
Many forces could have gone into forming J.D.'s abrasive character, some of which may go as far back as his grandfather, Vernon Presley Jr., 1827-1900. Like John Mansell, born a year later, he was a real cut-up. He was married several times, 4 times to be exact, simultaneously. He had also, according to the distinguished historian William Wright, deserted twice in the Civil War. He was caught the first time and dragged back. William Wright, incidentally, spent some time with Elvis in 1955 in Vicksburg, Mississippi, at a gas station while they were both getting their motorcycles fixed. What was his assessment of Elvis? He knew a lot about motorcycles. I think he knew more about motorcycles than he knew about people. The Presley family tree, according to the genealogical research of the National Enquirer, goes back to 1745 when an Andrew Presley, a Scots blacksmith, emigrated to North Carolina. His son, Andrew Presley Jr., fought in the Revolution. His son, Vernon Presley, wandered around Tennessee, which brings us to Vernon Jr. This is probably the place to add that a British dictionary of surnames by P.H. Rainey gives the following sources and variations for the surname Presley: Priestley, Priestley, Presley, 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 Prisley. Dweller by the priest's wood or clearing, along with the following comment: priest. In early examples denoting office, but later usually a nickname for a man of priestly appearance or no doubt often for one of a most unpriestly character. Martha Jane Wesson of Fulton, Itawamba County, was one of Playboy Dunnan Jr.'s wives. He loved her and left her with two daughters, Rosalinda and Rosella. Rosella Presley, 1862-1924, was J.D. Presley's mother. One of her daughters, Mrs. Robbie Stacy, interviewed in 1977, had this to say: "My mother told me that when she and her sister were just little babies, their grandparents had taken them to church on Sunday, and when they came back, their father Dunnan was gone. He went back to his other wife and child." Rosella never really knew her father, and the 10 children she subsequently had did not know their father or fathers. But, says Vernon Hood, the nephew of Minnie Mae Presley, they say she had some children by a man called Steele who was part Cherokee. Says her last-born son, Joseph Presley, she was a sharecropper. With 8 children, 2 died early, the Presley family contained the usual amount of good apples and bad apples common to every family. Jesse D. McLowell Presley, 1896-1973, J.D., early put himself into deadly competition with his brother Noah. Noah became metaphorically the good boy and Jesse the bad boy. What happened was that J.D. decided if he couldn't be the goodest apple, he was going to be the baddest. As a young man, Noah moved to East Tupelo, opened a grocery store, and ran a school bus. He was kind, generous, and public-spirited. J.D., on the other hand, besides drinking, was mean as hell, according to all reports. He pocketed the key when he locked up his whiskey so his wife, Minnie Mae, could not get at it to have a friendly nip with relatives, and he told her when folks came calling just exactly how many pieces of cheese to slice and how many biscuits to offer them. J.D. was also very good-looking. Gay McCrae, who was brought up in East Tupelo as a child, remembers after she'd grown up into an avid Elvis fan, her mother saying that Mr. Presley was the handsomest man I've ever seen in my life. All the women just couldn't help staring at him as he walked down the road. He was miles better looking than Elvis. To which Gay replied with some heat, "Vernon better looking than Elvis? Don't be foolish, Mama." "Oh, I wasn't talking about Vernon," said her mother. "I was talking about J.D." But he was a vain man, and his younger son's good looks and fine physique would have posed some sort of sexual threat to him that his elder son, Vester, who was short and scrawny, would not. J.D., at 17, married Minnie Mae Hood from Fulton. She was skinny, peppy, and peppery. She was 8 years older than he, and several steps above him socially. She may even have brought a dowry to the marriage. When they moved to East Tupelo, J.D. first worked shares on Dr. Feimster's land and then on Orville Bean's dairy farm. Eventually, blood prevailed, or more probably, Minnie Mae, as Vernon was her favorite son. And so, in the fullness of time, Vernon was forgiven by J.D. for doing exactly what J.D. had done at the same age. All were convinced that Vernon would now settle down to being an upright, mature, responsible, industrious, married man. Gladys Smith comes to Tupelo. Gladys entered the Great Depression and the Roosevelt era in work. On her first day in the vast room on the second floor of the Tupelo Garment Center, with the sun streaming in from the tall windows, Gladys's ears were assaulted by the clicking, whirring buzz of what seemed to be hundreds of motors running, and her eyes by what looked like hundreds of rows of spindles of thread, feeding into hundreds of sewing machines, at which sat hundreds of young women, primly side by side twisting and turning the ready-cut patterns of men's shirts under the machines. Gladys found it all tremendously exciting. It only took her a few days to get the hang of it. Everyone was so helpful, and after all, operating a sewing machine in the factory was not so different from running her friend Vera's machine, except that here, you did it all day long. Nor, in the close proximity of her co-workers, did it take Gladys long to make new friends. The factory girls were all about her own age. No girl under 16 was hired. And among them, there existed that atmosphere of breezy good fellowship that is always found when a number of more or less the same kind of people are assembled in the same place to do the same thing. Gladys didn't feel shy. With her boundless, cheerful chatter, she was soon accepted. The first thing she noticed about the town girls, with certain details of their clothes, she very much admired the flaring cut of their collars and their smart, slim, knotted ties and the gaily colored belts they wore to liven up their dresses, and in these flourishes, she strove to emulate them. Gladys meets Vernon. Gladys hardly had time to settle down in East Tupelo, though some of the night sights, the lightning bugs and the field mice, and some of the night sounds, the whippoorwills, the frogs, the crickets, and the hoot owls were familiar to the country girl. She could hardly get used to the fire trucks clanging day and night because some house or store or factory was always burning down. and she could hardly get used to the rumbling of the trains as they rushed by. They sounded so close they might be right in the same room with you. But just as she was starting to learn not to jump out of her skin as the shrill shriek of the laundry whistle pierced through the dawn at 6 o'clock every morning, and just as she was starting to get to know her neighbors and to find her way around, Mr. Roy Martin's grocery store on Lake Street and Miller, as candy store which specialized in homemade, chocolate-covered coconut and nut candies. When one day it was spring, it was April. It was around her 21st birthday, Gladys saw a young man. He was beautiful, tall, and fair-haired, and she didn't know who he was. He was the one thing lacking in her new and optimistic horizon. The one person she had to see daily walking along one of those 5 streets. The one person she had to see every Sunday in the small congregation at the First Assembly of God Tabernacle. He had to appear. She didn't know who he was, but they told her he was one of the large Presley clan and that he lived with his mother and father on the old Saltillo Road, and that his name was Vernon. The elopement. On Saturday, June 17th, 1933, hard to believe they actually waited for the weekend, Gladys and Vernon, along with Marshall Brown and his wife Bona Mae, née Presley, took off for Pontotoc. All in one day they made out an application for a marriage license, made out a marriage license and certificate, and then, by virtue of a license from the clerk of the circuit court of said county of Pontotoc, the circuit clerk, Mr. J.M. Gates, this day celebrated the rites of matrimony between Mr. Vernon Presley and Miss Gladys Smith. Vernon, says Bona Mae Brown, was very nervous, and Gladys smiled right through the whole thing. In fact, she smiled right through the rest of the day. Vernon gave his age as 22, and Gladys gave hers as 19. The Browns would have known that Vernon was 17, but they would have had no way of knowing that Gladys, a newcomer to East Tupelo, was not 19, nor would there have been a telltale birth certificate to betray her. As mentioned previously, the law requiring births to be registered and certificates to be issued was not passed in Mississippi till late 1912. Gladys, born in April, was not registered, and that is how she wanted it. Gratefully, she shed her 2 past years, those 2 hard, discouraging years filled with more than their share of heartbreak and sadness. For all her fooling herself about her age, which she would do till the end of her life, and for all her inveterate romanticism, Gladys did not fool herself for a moment about Vernon. He was not going to make life any easier for her. He was not going to make anything of himself. Of course, she must have thought, as all women do, that she might make something of him, but she wasn't counting on it. She simply accepted him for what he was, a ravishingly handsome, tender-hearted, unambitious young loafer. She loved him passionately, and without question, he returned her love. Impetuosity and impulsiveness played a large part in her makeup. One cannot ignore the fact that this was the second time she had eloped. She knew nothing of moderation or half measures, nor was there anything half-hearted or self-protective about her. "We just ran off like a couple of kids," was the way she later described it. This was accurate. She did not feel like a 21-year-old woman. She felt like a kid. Elvis would inherit from Gladys her unpredictable impulses, building a life together. The newlyweds had no place to stay. The Smiths had been living 6 in their little house on Kelly Street, and the Presleys' father J.D., mother Minnie Mae, Vester the eldest son Vernon, and the 4 young sisters, Delta, Nashville, Lorene, and Gladys, a popular name of the period, henceforth she would be known as Little Gladys, and Elvis's mother as Big Gladys, lived on the old Saltillo Road in what they called the Big House, as it had 4 rooms. Around this time, the Presleys also had lodging with them the Reverend Edward Parks of the First Assembly of God Church and his wife. The situation was that although each house had accommodated Gladys and Vernon separately, neither could accommodate both. Again, they were indebted to the philanthropy of Marshall and Bona Mae Brown. For weeks thereafter, they were their house guests, sleeping on the floor in a made bed. Vernon and Gladys now only needed a house of their own to complete their bliss. The site chosen was the empty lot next door to the Presleys' home on the old Saltillo Road. It was on Orville Bean's property, and Bean loaned Vernon $180 with interest to build the house and then charged him rent until he repaid it. He did this with all the tenants on his property. J.D. and Vester are supposed to have helped Vernon build the little shotgun house. Probably they did, but as we know, he could have done it on his own. One thing he did know about was carpentry. In this case, he did a fine job, and if you walk in it and around it today, never mind that it's been prettified by paint, and wallpaper and various added touches. The basic bones of the little two-room house. After some 50 years of rain, floods, violent storms, and tornadoes, are still sound and upright. The windows and doors are well placed and well made, as are the chimney and floors. The tongue and groove boards that comprise the outside. Walls show first-rate workmanship and are in excellent condition. Like all houses built at the time, it was raised on stone piles to allow for drainage during the spring flood. Vernon also built a barn on the property and an outhouse. Some people remember that the Presleys had a cow of their own, and some that they shared the cow with their in-laws. They also had chickens running around the yard. None of the yards of the houses above. The highway had grass no one could have afforded a lawnmower, and besides, the chickens would have scratched a lawn to bits. Grass was the enemy. Every day Gladys was out with her dogwood broom, sweeping the dirt yard clean and tidy. Pregnancy and the twins. About the end of June 1934, Gladys knew she was pregnant. Sometime around her 5th month, she was sure she was having twins. It has been suggested that this knowledge came to her in the form of a spiritual visitation, but there were far more realistic reasons for her to expect twins. Not only was she unusually large early on in her pregnancy and, at a more advanced stage, could feel 2 babies inside her kicking separately, but the family had histories of twins on both sides. Sales Presley had a fraternal twin brother. Gordon and Gladys had identical twin cousins. Elsie and Ellis Mansell. Annie Presley's daughter has twins.
Gladys had been as impatient to begin her married life as her mother. Doll had been reluctant. She doted on Vernon. The very sight of him filled her with pleasure. She wanted him near her at every possible moment. Now she was pregnant, and even though it was a difficult pregnancy, what with being so heavy and so tired and her legs all swollen up, she was glad. From the minute she had married Vernon, she had wanted to have not just children, but his children, who would look like him, and their children, that they would share, and yes, her children, who would be around her all the time. Conclusion.
By the time Gladys Presley lay in her final months of pregnancy in the winter of 1935, the threads of 2 very different stories had quietly converged. Tupelo itself had spent nearly a century talking itself into being inflating courthouses that didn't exist, dressing up hardship as promise, turning genuine but modest gains into grand civic legend. It was a town built as much on belief as on brick and rail line. The Presleys were cut from similar cloth. Behind them stretched a lineage of wanderers, sharecroppers, and quiet strivers, a family like Rosella's 10 fatherless children or J.D.'s lifelong rivalry with his brother, shaped by hardship, secrecy, and the stubborn will to endure it anyway. Vernon carried that same restless, undisciplined charm that had defined his father and grandfather before him. Gladys, impulsive and clear-eyed, loved him for it rather than in spite of it. Neither the town's myth-making nor the family's tangled history could have predicted what was coming. But both had, in their own ways, spent generations rehearsing the same lesson. That ordinary beginnings, however humble or improvised, could be narrated into something larger than life. In January 1935, in a 2-room house Vernon had built on borrowed money, that lesson was about to be tested in the most unexpected way imaginable with the birth of twin boys, one of whom would not survive, and the other who would carry Tupelo's talent for self-invention further than any booster pamphlet ever dreamed.
Section 1. Dunn Presley Jr. and Descendants.
Name Dunning Dunn Presley Jr. Born July 1, 1827 in Madisonville, Monroe County, Tennessee. Passed March 10, 1900 in Washburn, Berry County, Missouri. Place of burial, Washburn Prairie Cemetery in Washburn, Berry County, Missouri. Parents, Dunning John, Dunn Presley Sr. and Mary Louise Warren Presley. First spouse, Martha Jane Wesson, Presley Steele, married 1861. Second spouse, Emily Elizabeth Eliza Bryson Pope Presley, married 1868. Third spouse, Harriet Henrietta Toy Presley, married 1882. Siblings, Andrew Peter Presley, Isaiah Presley, George W. Presley, Mary Louisa Presley, Kittrell, Anthony Presley, Alan Presley. Children, Joshua Presley, Rosella Elizabeth, Rosie Presley, Rosalinda Presley, John Presley, James George Washington Presley, Narcissa C. Sis Presley, Andrew Jackson Presley. Info, on November 1st, 1847 at the age of 20, Dunn enlisted at Knoxville as a private in Captain Jano C. Vaughan's company of the 5th Reg of Tennessee Volunteers. Name, Andrew Peter Presley. Born May 4, 1804 in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. Passed February 6, 1888 in Ellijay, Macon County, North Carolina. Place of burial: Cullowhee Baptist Church, Cemetery in Cullowhee, Jackson County, North Carolina. Parents: Dunning John, Dunnan Presley Sr. and Mary Louise Warren Presley. Spouse: Nancy Jane Tilly Presley. Siblings: Isaiah Presley, George W. Presley, Mary Louisa Presley. Kittrell Anthony Presley, Dunning John Presley Jr., Alan Presley. Children: Mary Polly, Presley Ledford, David Swain Presley, Nancy Jane Presley. Haskett: Monterville P. Presley, Louis Klingman Presley, Fidela Patton Presley, Mary Ann Presley Frizzle. Name: Martha Jane Wesson Presley Steele. Born 1840 in North Carolina. Passed 1868 in Itawamba County, Mississippi. Place of burial: buried or lost at sea. Parents: Edward Clanton Wesson and Emily Millie Bowen. First spouse: Dunning John, Dunnan Presley Jr., married 1861. Second spouse: William Steele. Children: Rosella Elizabeth, Rosie. Presley: Rosalinda Presley, John Presley, Josephine Steele. Name: Rosella Elizabeth Rosie Presley. Born February 16, 1861, in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed July 30, 1924, in Pineville, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Ridge Cemetery in Itawamba County, Mississippi. Parents: Dunnan John, Dunnan Presley Jr. and Martha Jane Wesson Presley Steele. Siblings: Rosalinda Presley and John Presley. Half-siblings: Joshua Presley, Josephine Steele, James George Washington Presley, Narcissa C. Sis Presley, Andrew Jackson Presley. Children: Walter G. Presley, Minnie Bell, Elizabeth, Essie Presley, Minnie Eudocia Dosha Presley. Steele Robertson, Noah, Edward Presley, Jesse Dunning, McClowell, D. Presley, Calhoun, Cal Mac Presley, Robbie Presley, Stacy, Joseph Warren, Jody Presley. Jesse Dunning McClowell, D. Presley. Born April 9, 1896 in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed March 19, 1973, in Louisville, Jefferson County, Kentucky. Place of burial: Louisville Memorial Gardens, Weston Chivoli, Jefferson County, Kentucky. Parents: Rosella Elizabeth, Rosie Presley, and John Henry Wallace. First spouse: Minnie Mae Hood Presley, married 1913. Second spouse: Vera Kinnaird Presley, married 1948. Siblings: Walter G. Presley, Minnie Bell, Elizabeth, Essie Presley, Minnie Eudocia Dosha Presley. Steele Robertson, Noah, Edward Presley, Calhoun, Cal Presley, Mac Presley, Robbie Presley, Stacy, Joseph Warren, Jody Presley. Children: Vester Lee Presley, Vernon Elvis Presley, Delta Mae Biggs Presley, Gladys Erlene Presley, Dowling, Rev Nashval Lorene Nash, Presley Pritchett. Name: Noah Edward Purcell Presley. Born August 1890 in Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed September 13, 1969 in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Priceville Memorial Gardens in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Parents: Rosella Elizabeth, Rosie Presley, and John Henry Wallace. First spouse: Susan Izora Griffin Presley, married 1910. Second spouse: Mary Christine, Chris Houston, Roberts Presley, married 1940. Children: Sumter David, Sump Griffin, James Whitford, Whit Presley, Tranny Eekford, Eek Presley, Bona Mae Presley Brown, Oma Sedera Presley, Goebel Thurston Presley, Rubel Arthur Presley Sr. Purcell, Sales Presley, Gordon Doc Presley, Eva Joyce Presley White, Arnold Edward Presley, Larry Wayne Presley, James Roy Presley, Harold Ray Presley, and Norma Faye Presley Ray. Relation to Elvis: Noah is Elvis's uncle. Info: Noah was mayor of East Tupelo, taking office January 7, 1936, which is the year of the deadly tornado hit in Tupelo. 201 Tupelo area residents dies in the tornado. Noah was also city marshal, which would now be chief of police. Noah drove a school bus and also had a general store. Name: Minnie Mae Hood Presley. Born June 17, 1890 in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed May 8, 1980 in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Graceland Estates Mansion in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Parents: William H. Buck Hood and Mary Louisa Duchess Warren Hood. Spouse: Jesse Dunning McClowell, D. Presley. Siblings: Minervia L. Hood, Wileman, Harrison J. Hood, Sally Hood, William Nathaniel Bill Hood, Ophi D. Hood. West: Lou Alice Hood Johnson. Children: Vesterly Presley, Vernon Elvis Presley, Delta Mae Biggs Presley, Gladys Erlene Presley, Dowling, Rev Nashval Lorene, Nash Presley Pritchett. Relation to Elvis, Elvis's grandmother. Name: Purcell Sales Presley. Born July 17, 1918 in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed May 28, 1951 in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Priceville Memorial Garden in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Parents: Noah Edward Presley and Susan Azora Griffin Presley. Spouse: Annie Virginia Cloyd Presley. Siblings: Sumter, David, Sump, Griffin, James Whitford, Whit. Presley, Tranny Eekford, Eek. Presley, Vona Mae Presley. Brown, Oma Sedera Presley, Goebel Thurston Presley, Rubel Author Presley Sr., Gordon Doc Presley. Half-siblings: Eva Joyce Presley White, Arnold Edward Presley, Larry Wayne Presley, James Roy Presley, Harold Ray Presley, Norma Faye Presley Ray. Children: Doris Jean Presley, Willis, Sales Marion Presley, Barbara Sue Presley, Andrea Diane Presley, Yant. Name: Annie Virginia Cloyd Presley. Born August 26, 1921, in Pritchard, Mobile County, Alabama. Passed February 21, 2008, in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Place of burial: Priceville Memorial Gardens in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. First spouse: Purcell Sales Presley. Second spouse: John Delton Presley. Children: Doris Jean Presley Wills, Sales Marion Presley, Barbara Sue Presley, Andrea Diane Presley Yant, and Rhonda Presley Hall.
Section 2, Vesterly Presley and siblings, children of Jesse Dunning McClowell and Minnie Mae Presley.
Name: Vesterly Presley. Born September 11, 1914, in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed January 17, 1997, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Parents: Jesse Dunning McClowell, Dee Presley, and Minnie Mae Hood Presley. Spouse: Cletsley Smith Presley. Siblings: Vernon Elvis Presley, Delta Mae Biggs Presley, Gladys Erlene Presley, Dowling, Rev Nashval Lorene Nash Presley Pritchett. Name: Vernon Elvis Presley. Born April 10, 1916, in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Passed June 26, 1979, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Graceland Mansion, Estates in Memphis, Tennessee. First spouse: Gladys Love Smith Presley, married 1933. Second spouse: Devada Mae, D. Elliot Dunick Stanley Presley, married 1960. Children: Jesse Garion Presley and Elvis Aaron Presley. Name: Delta Mae Biggs Presley. Born June 19, 1919, in Fulton, Itawamba County, Mississippi. Seer July 29, 1993, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Spouse: Eugene Patterson Pat Biggs. Name: Gladys Erlene Presley Dowling. Born January 29, 1923, in Tupelo, Lee County, Mississippi. Passed December 19, 1985, in Tallahassee, Leon County, Florida. Place of burial: Roselawn Cemetery in Tallahassee, Leon County, Florida. First spouse: Robert Lee Dowling Jr. Second spouse: Hoyle Fleet Morgan. Name: Rev Nashval Lorene Nash Presley Pritchett. Born December 14, 1925, in Tupelo, Mississippi. Passed April 25, 1994, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Crosslawn Cemetery, Wynn, Cross Cobert, Arkansas. Spouse: William Earl Pritchett. Children: Jesse Earl Pritchett, Jerry Wayne Pritchett, Karen Sue, Susie Pritchett.
Not family-related members.
Name: Davida Mae, D. Elliot Dunack Stanley Presley. Born June 16, 1925, in Waverly, Humphreys County, Tennessee. Passed September 28, 2013, in Nashville, Davidson County, Tennessee. Place of burial: Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Goodlettsville, Davidson County, Tennessee. Parents: James Wright Elliott and Bessie Mae Health Elliott. First spouse: Frank Eugene Bob Lunack, married 1943. Second spouse: William Jabe Stanley, married 1949. Third spouse, Vernon Elvis Presley, married 1960. Siblings, Zada Pearl Elliott. Half-siblings, Clara Huela, Elliot Forsta, Samuel Sam Sammy, Elliot Gully Elliott, Rosa Viola, Ora Ola, Elliot Choate, Robert N. Elliott, Cora Bell, Elliot Hill, Richard Booker Neely. Children, Billy Stanley, Ricky Stanley, and David Stanley.
Name Billy Stanley, born January 1952. Info, stepbrother to Elvis Presley.
Name, Ricky Stanley, born December 13, 1953, in Huntsville, Madison County, Alabama. Passed to January 7, 2019, in Trenton, Edgefield County, South Carolina. Parents, William Jabe Stanley, Devada May, D. Elliott Dunac Stanley Presley. Siblings, Billy Stanley, David Stanley. Info, stepbrother to Elvis Presley.
Name David Stanley, born August 1955. Info, stepbrother to Elvis Presley. Our family lines Mansell, Smith, and Presley. The Mansell family line, a line rooted in resilience and togetherness carried forward by each generation that came before us. Their story is one of hard work, quiet strength, and a lasting sense of home. The Smith family line, a family shaped by determination and care for one another, passing down values that continue to guide us today. Their legacy lives on through the traditions we still hold close. The Presley family line, a heritage built on faith, family, and perseverance through changing times. Their journey reminds us where we came from and the foundation we stand on.
Thank you for watching Every Family Line Tells a Story with remembering, like, share, and subscribe.